Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 19 of Restitching the Tapestry. Ari and I are here tonight with our alcoholic beverages of choice. Ari, what do you have?
I've got Chateau Saint Michel rosé.
Oh my God, so classy, like way classier than me.
I'm a wine mom.
I am like a college student basically with hot chocolate with peppermint schnapps in it. I don't care though, it's so good.
We've
It's
got
kind
two
of
different we've got two different vibes going on.
Right. Like I think it's kind of perfect since we're going to be talking about, divisions between two different parties and two different candidates and the duality kind of goes hand in hand with the theme of tonight. It's a stretch of the imagination, I know. But I'm going to do what I have to do to make connections if possible. All right. So welcome to episode 19. We are literally one episode away from having 20 episodes, which is really, really cool to think. And we're really excited. Like, we have probably the next, how many episodes do we have plotted out from here on out? I think we have the
The
next
next like 6 or 7.
6 or 7. Yeah. And actually, we have some episodes figured out for January already as well. So that's going to be exciting. What we're like, just to give everybody an idea of what's happening, we are going to be taking a break throughout part of December, obviously for holidays, creative recharge, so on and so forth. And then we will be back for season 2 of Restitching the Tapestry in January. So it's going to be really, really fun. We're really excited about it. So we have Igni tuning in. We have RB tuning in so far. Igni says, Donny, without your beard, you look so different in a good way. Thank you. I look like a Keebler elf. I have a very distinct baby face. In fact, when Ari met me, I didn't have facial hair at all. Like I never really had facial hair extensively until my senior year of college, and that was very fleeting too. So,
Right. I always remember him as having the baby face.
hmm see the advantage of it, because I usually have facial hair because of teaching, because I want my students to not think that I'm 10. But like I always have people commenting like, Donnie, you look like you're in your early 20s all the time. And it's so flat. Like I'm just like, thank you. Like that's so sweet. Like until people question like, are you old enough to be a teacher? Are you old enough to be doing this? And I'm just like, yes. Yes, I am. Um, but it'll grow back very quickly. And the truth is, I think that the sacrifice of the beard was necessary to embody Velma for a day. So I am glad that everybody enjoyed my last video, because I had to do some sort of quick little video documenting my metamorphosis into one of my favorite cartoon characters. So anywho, oh, thank you. Thank you, Igni, and thank you, RP2. Sophie is here. Hi, Sophia. It's good to see you.
Hi, Sophia.
We all go way back. Okay, so tonight, obviously, we are going to be talking extensively about the election, the current environment in our country right now. And in many ways, it might be a therapy session for us, but at the same time, we're hoping that we might be able to do some really interesting reflection on the state things are, and maybe predict what might be to come depending on how things go over the next couple of days. So before we get started, I do want to take a moment and read our show's mission statement, as we always do. So many witness different atrocities, large or small, that fray the social fabric around us, and much of the time many may feel powerless and know not how to address such things. And this fray has gotten worse with the rise of social media, because everybody witnessing things share in this collective trauma as things go viral in a real time setting, but in a mass scale. Like we're able to experience this collective grief and outrage together. So that really begs the question of what can we do to mend those communities that have seen tragedy, or those communities who are much more vulnerable and at risk. And our goal through this show is to restitch the tapestry, um, and, in a way, create awareness with regard to how different things negatively affect these communities. And we want to do this through conversation, creativity, and action. And ultimately, our goal is to educate. So, thank you for joining us again. So, Ari, um, where to begin? My immediate question is, what is your reaction to the current state of our election here in the United States?
Well, I feel like that there's a general anxiety because people in this country have, because of the rise of technology and the 24-hour news cycle, gotten so used to things being quick that they're not used to being patient and being um waiting for things to play out. So they want it to be immediate. And so they want the presidency to be figured out quickly, and they want it to be done fast. And so the fact that it's taking days or up to a week, or even maybe it'll drag out into several weeks, the fact that they have to be patient and they have that delayed gratification of finding out who the president is. Um, it's causing them anxiety. For me, I'm so used to having that delayed gratification, and I have had delayed. I've had that. I'm so used to delayed like anticipation of something, that it doesn't bother me so much. So I'm like, whatever. But like for a lot of people, um, they're not used to having something right away.
Hmm.
So they're they're kind of freaking out.
Well, and on top of that, I mean, we are still in a pandemic too. There are still a lot of people who are out of work. There are a lot of people who are quarantined, who are at home, and really their only outlet is watching what's happening in the world right now. And while we have immediate access to information via the news, via the internet, there's still, like you were saying, kind of like this latent anticipation of wanting to know what's going on, wanting to know what the result will be. And what adds another complicating layer on top of all of that is the differing rhetoric that we see coming from one end of the election versus the other end of the election, you know? And it like people can see these conflicting stances and views on things. And I do think that some really feel like we're in this tug of war because things are very polarized. I know today I spent most of my day grading, but I was watching the news at the same time. And for a huge majority of the reporting on the election, like everybody, like all the anchors, everybody, they were just making comments about this election is so polarizing, like because it's so alarmingly close still. Like Biden is etching out like ahead of Trump, but it's still very close. The fact that it's so close proves how divided this entire country is. And I do think it's a little bit scary. I do think it's scary. I mean, both of us coming from marginalized communities, especially, like I am obviously like I get really upset over people voting for politicians who support legislation that's very anti-LGBTQ plus. And in my world, like in my rationalization, I think that it's people's priority to vote on the basis of looking at things from a human perspective instead of necessarily maybe a financial perspective. And of course, I know like everybody has like different sets of life experience, but and we'll talk a little bit more later about like situations related to that, because obviously the election has caused a lot of strain on people, a lot of strain on relationships, friendships, so on and so forth. So um now, like, in your exposure to the election so far, Ari, what have you observed from people online? Like, what do you see them saying? Like, what is the consensus you think about the election right now from your perspective?
So I made a few comments online, and like it seems like I'm not getting a whole lot of negativity. Like, okay, so I went on on my YouTube, it's kind of like an insulated situation. So I saw a Saturday Night Live video pop up from 4 years ago of the returns from it was a Chappelle skit of the returns from a Hillary um, sketch where it shows the Hillary returns coming in, and everybody's getting really upset, and they're like, Kentucky, all the racists are from Kentucky, and it's showing like Hillary slowly losing, and everybody's just slowly getting more and more upset, and Chappelle's just sitting back, and then Chris Rock comes in, and they're like, and then Donald Trump, it says Donald Trump wins the election, and they're like, this is the worst thing that we've ever done in our American history. And Chappelle and Chris Rock goes, well, and they start laughing, and they're like, yes, that's the worst thing we've ever done in our American history. And that's the end of the sketch. And I was like, and we in the comment section recently, we started talking about electing Biden. And I said, I did my part in Michigan. This is just as the results were coming in. I said, we did our part in Michigan. We're just waiting for the results to come in. And people were like starting to comment on that. And then people were like, we got Michigan, we got Michigan, we got Michigan. And I was like, I had like 10 or 15 comments from people, and they were all really positive comments. But it was like there was this huge comment thread from people who were really positive, and they were like super excited, and like everybody was like in this comment thread from Hillary Clinton from 4 years ago talking about Biden.
That's amazing. It's interesting because it really depended on what social media outlet I was on. Because on Twitter, I noticed that everybody was like super positive, especially about what happened in Michigan. Michigan flipping blue. Unlike 2016, we flipped Republican that year. But on Facebook, it was very much mixed because like a lot of conservative people dominantly use Facebook.
Mhm.
And I'm going to talk a little bit more elaborately about comments later. But suffice it to say, like, there were a lot of people upset at Biden supporters, deeming them as being selfish. Um, a lot of the language focused on the economy, like the economy is going to tank, uh, there's going to be um, like countless abortions, like, and so on and so forth. Like it definitely spiraled into rhetoric focused on issues that conservatives are largely passionate about. And then of course there were like, from in my impression, there was also like a healthy amount of like positivity too, like people celebrating and in a way feeling like this collective sense of relief. And I'm not going to lie, like I personally do feel some relief as well. Um, and and I know all of you know my reasoning for the relief. I mean, again, looking at things from the LGBTQ plus perspective, like it's been kind of a scary past couple of months, as Ari and I can both relate. that like we've been very uncertain over like the Supreme Court currently, the decisions that have been made, the conversations that have been had, um, and like the news of Biden like finding some form of success was just very alleviating in some ways. Like obviously the election isn't over yet, but with the momentum that we see so far, it looks like it's progressing in a positive direction at least for um, liberals at least. Um, so
But we don't know how it's gonna go. It's
exactly.
still up in the air. It could go Biden, it could go Trump, but we don't know. Um,
Well, after like right now, if we look at the electoral map, too bad I don't have a visual of that to pull up. We'd be so fancy if we did. But according to the electoral map right now, um, Biden for sure has 253 um,
Trump
250.
has Trump has 214.
Yeah, 214, and they need 270 in order to win the presidency. And right now, Biden is leading in most of the remaining states. Some of them are, it's a very like slim margin, of course. But right now, a lot of people are looking at Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania has 20 electoral votes. And if Biden wins that, that's
He
going to put him
wins
over. Yeah, that's going to
the
win.
whole kit and caboodle.
Exactly. So right now, Biden has more pathways to 270, whereas the president has one pathway, and that pathway is he needs to win all of the states. He literally needs to win all of the remaining states. So, um, and a lot of people, of course, are. Let me. Well, one moment. Oh, Sophia and Igny say that Biden has 264. I think I was getting 253 because CNN hasn't officially called Arizona as being like projected to win by Biden yet. They're waiting on that. So I was looking at CNN's example, but I do know that AP and other outlets have labeled it 264. And if that is the case, if they do end up calling Arizona soon, that means that Biden's pathway is very, very easy. All he has to win is one of those states, one of those remaining states,
Nevada.
probably Nevada. That yeah, that's worth 6 electoral votes. So we'll have to see what happens. Now, understand like obviously we know that um, the president and his um, administration have made comments about seeking legal action against certain states on the bases of lack of transparency, like some states are being accused of lack of transparency, and if you've listened to what the president's been saying over the past few days, you will probably know that he has made comments about mass voter fraud because most of these states issued mail-in ballots to people who
Yes,
requested
the
them.
the not quite clear message of stop the count or keep the count going.
Yeah, yeah, and and it's just really ironic because earlier in the year he like responded to somebody's tweet saying like, "Oh, if you're in such and such state, like sign up for an absentee ballot." And here he is criticizing absentee ballots because they're right now responsible for him not winning because Democratic voters throughout this whole pandemic, they've been more, you know, liable to use absentee voting because, well, a lot of them were taking the pandemic a lot more seriously. They were considering safety and not wanting to stand in lines. So like that's kind of like the central thread of the rhetoric happening on the right now.
And that's where he's coming from, is that he's saying that they're throwing extra ballots on the ballots when the voters from the polls went in and their votes got counted first, and then the early voters got counted. So it seems like those early voters got thrown on top when really they're just getting counted in order.
Right. Yeah. Like a lot of states, like obviously did in-person voting and calculated that first because a lot, like I know this happened here in Michigan. In Michigan, the Republican legislature turned down um like the voting commissions, I think it's the voting commission's requests to start counting absentee ballots early so they wouldn't end up being behind, and the Republican legislature denied them that. Um so like obviously because of that they have to now count them after the election, and that's happening in quite a few different states. There were a few states, I think Florida was one of them. There were a couple other states that like they ruled that, you know, you could count the absentee ballots first, and they got their counts done really fast, and it was like super efficient. But if you look at the remaining states, that's part of the dilemma that happened. So
Nevada.
Nevada being one of them, and
In Nevada, they sent every single citizen an absentee ballot. And that's what the problem is that Nevada, every single citizen has an absentee ballot, and they're sending them all back. And so they don't know quite how many absentee ballots they have to work with. So they're just getting them all as they come. And so they don't know how many to expect. They just know that they should count them as they come.
see like that, like I'm really, I mean, one, that doesn't help the it doesn't help with the rhetoric on the right either, because that's probably something that really like they're clinging to, like, oh gosh, you sent ballots to literally every citizen. And I don't know if that was entirely the wisest idea either, because I feel like that would make it more confusing to track. um but I mean, we have to consider it also through the lens of it being a pandemic. Like there were a lot of states who were like, how the hell are we going to do an election if there's going to be a pandemic going on? And they were trying to do damage control to figure that out. And I mean, in Nevada's decision, yeah, that was, it appears that's the decision that they came up with. So I know when I was watching the news this evening, like they had like a lot of voters in line again after they had called them to bring in, you know, like bring in your ID so we can like double check that this is in fact your vote. And like a lot of voters are upset that they even have to do that. And they're afraid that they're going to lose their vote that they had cast, because of this extra, um, you know, layer of things. So, RP, I don't think I did hear about that. I usually don't. I don't really go on 4chan at all because I know 4chan's kind of like Igny says, 4chan's kind of a harbor for,
It's really hard to pay attention to
yeah.
what happens on 4chan because, like, sometimes you will get really useful information from 4chan, like the time they hacked Sarah Palin's email. But, like,
Hmm.
sometimes, most of the time, it's just like you get
Well, yeah,
horrible
that like
memes.
it's kind of a harbor of inconsistency, you know, because um like on outside of 4chan, like there are like certain things that you can do to determine if a source is reliable or not, whereas in 4chan it's a lot more difficult to do that. Kind of the same thing with Reddit. Like I do enjoy Reddit, but sometimes Reddit is really difficult to
Deal with, yeah.
assess and deal with, and sometimes not user friendly. At least maybe for me it's not super user friendly. But okay, I need to
I
stop.
like I like Reddit, but Reddit is, yeah, you have to really pick your groups, like, carefully on Reddit.
Yeah. Yep. But then again, I suppose that could be said for any social media site too when you think about it.
I feel like that is, unfounded, um, I feel like that's some QAnon stuff if they said that they found child porn on his computer. Um,
Oh, are you RP, are you talking about Biden? I don't know if Bowden was a misspelling, because at first I didn't know who that was. Um, there Keep in mind there is a lot of misinformation that has been deliberately put out there. I think it's if you ever encounter that information, it's important that you weigh it against other sources to see if it holds up and if it's consistent. Because if you are referring to Biden, that has been disproven considerably. Often, it's been disproven by several sites. Were also like rumors about him like touching children inappropriately,
being part
and
of a sex pedo ring.
mhm. Yeah, that is a very common right, like rumors perpetuated by the rhetoric coming from the right. Shayna's here. Hi, Shayna. It's good to see you. Woohoo! Um, so
That's a QAnon theory, isn't it?
I believe so. Yes. Yep. QAnon believes that the liberal part, like the Democratic Party, is a harbor of like
Pedophilia.
this elaborate ring of sex trafficking and pedophilia, and the truth is, like, to me, like, looking at it from an objective perspective, because I've obviously researched it to find sources corroborating that, and there are no reliable sources.
Also, that
It's
they're cannibals, that they eat babies or something.
Yeah, I saw that too. It's clearly it's fear mongering. Like, it's all fear mongering because the right, I mean, the right has very strong beliefs about um, pro-life, and that kind of really drums up a lot of emotional reaction, especially when they start saying things about like children being in danger. Not that, the left doesn't care about, child safety as well. Like, everybody cares about child safety. But because the conservative side really has some passionate, like religious centered views about pro life, like, I think that kind of triggers a reaction, which is why those types of pieces of misinformation get so, I don't know, like, perpetuated on social media, if that makes sense. But interestingly, if we like I mean, we see one reaction coming from the right. If we look at how the left is reacting right now, like, obviously there's kind of like this mass excitement, right? Because like a lot of people are relieved that Biden is inching like ahead of Trump during this election. Um, and like, obviously, like, when we see both candidates speak, like, obviously in Trump's rhetoric, he's been very much about like kind of sowing these seeds of fear, like fear of fraud, fear of corruption, collusion,
Undermining democracy.
undermining democracy, socialism. Like, like, when you listen to him, there are very specific keywords and phrases that he uses because he is aware that those specific keywords and phrases are the sound bites that rally those who support him. And the truth is, like, the left has their own, specific phrases and words as well. It's just you have to pinpoint which belongs to, what group. Now the left is very much about, you know, talking about like bringing people together. Um, I know Biden, when he's been speaking, has been trying to create a sense of calm because, in light of a lot of the president's comments, if we look at states like Arizona, especially, there were armed protesters outside of election, like vote counting facilities.
In Philadelphia, too.
Yeah, and in Philadelphia, and even in Michigan, like, there were protesters in Detroit outside of where they were counting votes. and it was getting like extremely
Dangerous.
dangerous. So, and I think and I think that it's because of that rhetoric. That rhetoric is rallying people and making them terrified, thinking that there really is some sort of fraud and threat to democracy happening, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, and it makes people believe all sorts of things when you start saying that they're stealing the election, that they're undermining democracy, that they're doing all sorts of things when that's just not the case. And then he says things like they're not letting Republican um, viewers in there when they definitely are, and you know I feel like when he gives press conferences, there needs to be like a ticker underneath that says like this is not true.
Well, and like in addition, like I used to work election polls, and like there are policies about how far away poll watchers and poll challengers have to be from the counts taking place, from the voters who are voting. Like you can't be on top of those people. Not to mention, like if you are a poll watcher or a poll challenger, you have to go through a process to get that certification. And a lot of the people, especially in Michigan, were not certified poll watchers or challengers. They were just people like claiming that they wanted to challenge. So it is definitely a disregard for laws and policies that our democracy has created. And that's, to me, that is unsettling. Like that's what's most unsettling for me. Um,
That's ridiculous.
yeah.
I don't like it. I don't
So
like it at all.
suffice it to say, I am really glad that I stopped working elections some time ago because I cannot imagine the stress that these poll watchers have had to go through this election. I think they deserve a lot of kudos to doing a general election that's churned out this much voter turnout, and during a pandemic as
It's
well.
it's the highest voter turnout in history, isn't it?
It is. Last I checked, over 74 million people voted Democrat so far, and close to 70 million voted for Republican. And 4 years ago, Democrats churned out 65 million and Republicans churned out 62 million. So it's about this year we've churned out about 8 to 10 million more people voting. And but if
That
we come
doesn't that seems like it's not a lot, but that's a lot of people.
it's a lot compared to what we normally see. But if we put it in the grand perspective of things, and in fact I just looked this up earlier today because I was super curious. So if you combine that amount of voters, let me do some quick calculating. So 74 million plus 69 million, I think it's 143 million. I think there's 327 million people in the United States. That's only 44% of our population that came out to vote. So when you think about it, that's still not like even half of our country's population that voted, which is kind of surprising. Like, obviously, you have to exclude the fact that a lot of the population is, underage people who can't vote, so on and so forth. But,
I'll take it.
um,
I'll
oh yeah,
take it though.
oh yeah, like I think it's great, and I'm saying this for both sides of the aisle. I think it's great that there were so many voters that came out because I think it's important that people do exercise their civic duty. Oh wow. Sophia says, I had a poll challenger get up and started to walk a little towards us as inspectors. Definitely nerve wracking, but definitely worth the experience. And I remember as an election worker, um, I remember, like, we got training on that type of thing, but I always felt like the training wasn't good enough. Like, how do you deal with people like that? Because it's a confrontational situation potentially. It's very unsettling, and, I know,
What's
like, one Oh, go
what's
ahead,
a
Ari.
poll challenger do?
A poll challenger basically can confront a voter or election inspector in the sense that they can question their voter registration, question whether they are voting in the correct location, whether they're using the correct address, whether they are who they say they are. Um, it's basically a mode of like challenging someone
Oh,
on who they are and whether they are certified to vote, essentially. It's interesting. It's interesting.
my sister voted with a expired license.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I was like, I didn't think that it was possible, but she voted with an expired license. And I
So
was
that it's one of two things because I can't remember off the top of my head. Either the election inspector didn't see the date, or they just needed photo ID and they look at whether or not the voter registration is up to date.
yeah.
I think that's probably what they weigh over the license date. I can't remember off the top of my head. Sophia, if you have any insight on that, please correct me if I'm wrong, considering you more recently worked an election than me.
But I was like, uh she she went to she went to the place and they said, "Oh yeah, you can vote." And she was like, "Okay." But she had her birth certificate, she had her a utility bill, she had like a whole bunch of other stuff. But they said, but I think that there have been like uh cases in the past, like in like inner cities, where they've been like trying to like make it so that like you can vote even though you have an expired license. And so like it's like they try not to make it so that you can vote despite having an expired license. Like it's sort of like those are ways of which like they try to make it so that you can vote even though you have an expired license.
Right.
Like th like, having an expired license, it doesn't keep you from voting.
I think they more so look at, like, on licenses, they more so look at the location in which you're voting. Because obviously, if you're living in a completely different location, you either have to return to the original location where your license is labeled address-wise to vote, or you literally will have to register in the location where you actually live. So, um, I really
But
do think that they
I was
place.
just like I was just like, "Wow, she had an expired license, she was able to vote," and I was like, I feel like there's a lot about that there was something that happened with that and historically with people who weren't able to vote, and it had to do with Black people not being able to vote because it was like something like it was like some nitpicky thing that happened to do with Black people in the past. And
Mhm.
so it was like she benefited from some nitpicky law that happened. uh,
Uh,
and I was like, I feel like that it was something like that.
okay, interesting. Oh, thank you, Sophia, by the way. Um, so Ari, you voted in person, correct?
I voted absentee.
Absentee. Okay.
My ballot was I checked online. My ballot was sent on September 23rd and it was accepted September 30th.
Awesome. Good. Ended up voting in person, um, mostly because I didn't fill out my application for an absentee ballot on time. So, but when I went and vote, when I went with my partner, and of course it was extremely busy. The line was out the door and around the building, We had a wait of probably 30 minutes or so. But inside it was super busy. But I applaud all the inspectors because they had one person doing like 1 to 2 tasks, making sure that everybody was socially distanced, so on and so forth. It was really cool to see how well they were doing despite all of the drastic circumstances. Shayna, I agree with you. It's been kind of nerve-wracking for sure.
Sheena, when you voted by mail, did you check on your status of your application?
Good question. Yeah. So, it's really funny because we kind of talked about all of the different points that that I was considering. Good thing I have some discussion questions. Um, but I think I know it might be I know I sometimes hesitate to make predictions, but do you have any specific predictions of what you think will end up happening, Ari, by any chance?
So I think that he's gonna win Pennsylvania, but I think it's gonna get challenged. I think that he's gonna win Arizona, but I think it's gonna get challenged. I think he's gonna win Nevada, but I think it's gonna get challenged.
Yeah, I think he's gonna try. I think the president's gonna try his hardest to challenge every place. Now, granted, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, but I do think that it has to be within a 0.5% margin for them to challenge and do a recount. Um, but I mean, he could seek legal action on the basis of.
See, the way that challenges probably will happen is with Senate races first, so then they do recounts. So the Senate races will probably get recounts first.
Yeah, I know that there is a Senate race in Georgia that's going to have a secondary election because I
Like
think
a
it's,
runoff.
yeah, it's so close that they're going to have a runoff election. So.
Yeah, there's probably going to be a recount in Michigan because of Gary Peters and what's his
John
name, John
James.
James.
Oh,
John, he's not conceding. He's like, I didn't lose. I need a recount. I was like, he
see,
lost.
like my concern is if there is a recount and it proves again that he lost, what if he still refuses to concede?
It doesn't matter if he concedes or not. He lost.
That's true. That's true. Conceding is basically just an admission, they can still lose, but um yeah. I mean, I know that when they do finally say that Biden won, I know that the president's not going to concede. He's going to insist on. Um,
It's just whether or not they concede or not. And
mhm.
I mean, if they concede or not, it doesn't matter. It's whether or not it's certified. Like, they can concede or not. Like,
I think conceding is more of an
just
act
them
of
being a
decorum.
it's just whether or not they're good sports about it.
Yeah, it's an act of decorum. You call up the other candidate, congratulate them, so on and so forth.
They
Um,
don't have to be good sports.
that's true. That's true. It's just one would think they would be considering it is way more respectable to do so, but as we can tell from the past 4 years, that's not been everyone's priority. So,
I watched Jimmy Kimmel, special or, segment, and he said, that this was probably the best way that, Trump goes out is by suing America. I was like
there is a certain irony in it.
I was just like, yeah, he sues all of his exes, people he doesn't like, and people who just piss him off. So why not sue America? Sure, just sue America.
Igni, do you want to summarize what that video was about briefly? because I'm interested, of course. Um,
Legal Eagle! Oh my god. That's like probably a 40-minute video.
I know, right? So like honestly, I have the same prediction you do. Um, I've mostly been concerned about what Trump's supporters will do when Biden wins. Um, because due to the rhetoric, of course, like a lot of people are convinced that there is some sort of attack on democracy, that things are fraudulent, and I'm afraid that like there could be more armed protests that could be dangerous, you know? Like obviously people have a right to protest, and I think that protests do happen with every single election. Like I remember them happening when Trump was elected. Um but like obviously if they're trying to intimidate or be violent with people, like that's what's most concerning. Thankfully, I don't think I've heard of any specific incidents in Arizona other than like intimidation. But Igny says basically he says it's possible he could try this, but it wouldn't go well for him at all. Okay. Um, I do have a prediction that he might try to take things to the Supreme Court, kind of like what happened with Al Gore in year 2000. I don't know if you remember that, Ari, but
Mhm.
obviously that ruling did determine the election. But with so many states right now, I don't know if that.
I I don't think he has the legal basis to go to the Supreme Court for this election. I think that he, due to the nature of his legal claims, I just don't think that he'll have a basis to go to the Supreme Court.
Well, you have to have proof, and if there's no proof, then you're just going to waste their time. And like I remember seeing that there were a couple of um courts, like state courts, that struck down lawsuits already because there was no basis. So, like to me, I just think of it as like somebody just causing a ruckus just to for the sake of causing a ruckus. So,
So my sister was afraid of backlash too, that there was going to be like a coup of like protesters causing like armed protest. And I'm not terribly worried about it as much. Um, just because I don't know, I believe in the stability of the United States, and
true.
I believe that like they're such a small minority compared to, like, I just don't like
I think like
I just believe that the people who will come out in force won't be as many as
right.
like.
Like I think adding on to what you're saying, like I think that the people who are reacting extremely aren't like I mean they're I think they are a fraction of Trump supporters, but not the majority of Trump supporters. Like I do think that there are Trump supporters who will look at this and be like, okay, he lost. It was a democratic process. It was fair. Let's move forward, respectably. Like, and I hope that that is the case. Um, I just think that people like your sister probably have gotten concerned because they've seen how militant um, some supporters can get, with regard to, showing up on Capitol lawns, going into Capitol buildings armed, so on and so forth. I mean, we here in Michigan, we're super used to that at this point.
Right, with people having you know having uh
Going into the Capitol building, like,
having plans to take the governor and try and put her on trial for treason and then kill her.
God. And mind you, our president still hasn't spoken to that either and said he's chosen to continue to attack our governor. But, that's besides the point, right?
I'm really concerned about our governor's safety at this point.
I am too.
I really am concerned because especially with the election, like I'm just concerned about her safety. Um, like
And her family's safety. Like, I'm really worried about family too.
yeah,
I mean, I have faith that she probably has like very good protections in place that will, ensure her safety. So, hi, David. David, it's good to see you. So let's talk a little bit about like in our day-to-day lives, like handling people who are upset over the election results. Have you had any like interactions with people recently, like in your circle regarding the election?
oh boy, my dad is not happy. My biological father is not happy. He's not a happy camper. He's a Trump supporter and he's not happy.
I have family like that too. I do too. I I've consequently lost a couple of friends too. Um, all of you know how much of a loudmouth I tend to be. Like, I don't think of it as being a loudmouth. It's educating, but I'm fairly sure that it is like some conservatives probably think I'm a loudmouth. Um, but I tend to call things out as I see it tactfully. And the other day, like, I just saw like a lot of people making comments about like, well, don't be upset at your friends or family for voting for the opposite party or voting for Trump because like they love you and um all of that jazz. And of course I made a post about it. I basically said, because I've had people say this to me about me being vocal about LGBTQ plus concerns, I basically said, please don't talk down to marginalized communities feeling justifiably upset at loved ones and friends for voting for politicians actively working against the well-being of those communities. I know out of diplomatic instinct, many want to say, I look at a person's character, not their vote. Unfortunately, though, when you say that, it's a form of gaslighting that subtly tells marginalized people that they are unjustly holding people accountable for their choices. A person's vote is their choice and by default an extension of their character. So drawing attention to accountability isn't an attack. So that was um, something that I said. And of course, it got some negative reaction from some people. And I basically had a friend come at me recently that said, Donnie, like I am so tired of hearing about LGBTQ plus stuff. I'm so sick and tired of all that the LGBTQ plus community has. Like you have your rights, you have people that give you so much attention, but straight people and white people, we're discriminated against all the time and we don't get any like consideration. Like it's bad to be like, I'm trying to remember how they said it. It's bad to be the run of the mill American. That's what they said. And of course, I was like mind boggled by this because they proceeded to like make some very racist and homophobic comments. This was a person I had known for 15 years.
Yeah.
So like it's this whole election cycle and the past one just has this way of revealing people and their actual stances on things. So obviously I was just like, okay, this person's not salvageable. I'm not going to associate with them anymore. I need to catch up on the comments.
I live in a very red state. Gigi Gorilla says, I live in a
Hi,
very
Gigi
red
Gorilla.
state and Jewish, and there's a ton of people wielding Trump and Confederate flags and even some swastika flags. Scary, not a Trump fan at all, but respect people's opinions. I mean, I don't respect the swastika
Oh
flags.
no. Okay. So first of all, I am sorry that you live in an area that may seem unsafe. Um, and I hope that you have a good support network, of course. Um, but I think I don't think necessarily because Gigi Gorilla, you mentioned like stay safe, guys. Live your lives day by day and don't live on your knees because of this election. I think that's a good point. I think there are a lot of people who aren't living on their knees because they are holding people accountable and drawing attention to atrocities as they happen. Like I think when a person is mentally like able to do so, when they have the mental fortitude to do so, I think it's important that they do that. And part of the negative response that I have gotten from people in my life, and it's not from a lot of people. A lot of people get uncomfortable when they see others holding other people accountable because then they think in their minds, well, I should be holding people accountable too. And while that guilt isn't intentional, like I do think it's important for bystanders to examine what they're doing and what they're not doing, because sometimes what you don't do might be as concerning as what the opposing people are doing, if that makes sense. So let's see. Shayna, that's interesting. You've been accused of not being a real Jew because you voted against Trump. That's sad. Well, oh, David also
It's
said
chilly in
something.
here. Are you voting
Right.
again?
David says something interesting too. David said, it's like when people, I'll just put it up here. It's like when people tell me they're tired of hearing about the Holocaust. I'm like, well, why the heck does genocide keep happening in the world? Not to mention anti-Semitism. And the thing is, it really is about privilege. When groups of people haven't had to deal with certain things that marginalized communities have dealt with, they don't really see why it's applicable because it doesn't really weigh into their set of experiences. And I think that's why it's important that as Americans we demonstrate empathy, because like I have privilege, like Ari, you have privilege,
White
like
privilege,
yeah,
and
we have
I have straight passing privilege, and yeah, I have a lot of privilege.
I have white privilege. I have right now I have like in a way like financial privilege. I also have cis privilege, you know. And I think there's just been this deep-welled guilt surrounding privilege where when people mention privilege, they react so negatively that they shut down to having a conversation. And the truth is, I don't think privilege is an insult at all. And I've mentioned this in prior videos. Privilege is simply a reality, you know? Acknowledging your privilege isn't a negative thing, especially when you do so considering less, accessible communities. So let's see. I live on what seems to be a liberal island. Ann Arbor is a blessing, but also makes me surprised at how close things are. Um, I feel that way too. Like, I do think that it's interesting that buttons and rubbish. It's interesting because this election and the prior election has made me realize just how much I am surrounded by liberalism. Because, like, at first, I remember being really alarmed by people making racist comments and homophobic comments. The truth is, that's always been there. The only difference is now those things have been emboldened by literal examples that we're seeing in leadership and in media. Yeah. Um, let's see. Do. So, I mean, I know we're getting close to the end here. Let's spend a few minutes talking about accountability. Do you think do you think it is important holding people accountable? What do you think about that?
I mean, of course, it's important to keep people accountable. I think it's important that we hold Donald Trump accountable for his words, that he's undermining the state of democracy right now, and that he needs to be very careful about what he's saying. Um, we need to hold Biden accountable, um, continue to hold him accountable, that he is continuing to do the right thing and um, work towards, making sure that he stays on the right track towards just working towards unifying the country and working towards that unified vision of America. And Donald should be working towards that too, where he says that we come together instead of saying that they're stealing the election, and that he should be working towards more towards a vision of the future uh, instead of they're stealing the election. Maybe he should be talking about what he hopes for the next 4 years uh, instead of tearing people down.
Instead
Uh,
of sowing seeds of fear.
if he's so sure that he's going to win the election, which I don't think he is so sure he's going to win the election, maybe he should talk about that instead of uh, things. But I think that he's nervous about losing the election, and he's talking like a sore loser, uh,
Mhm.
and he's trying to grasp at straws, and he is desperately trying to save something that is becoming slowly and slowly out of his grasp. And I think that he is working on something that is becoming out of his reach, and he is,
Doing it at other people's expense.
yeah, he's kind of sowing negativity. Yeah.
I mean,
And
it really is at the expense of unity
yeah.
because, like, fear and uncertainty have a way of making people second guess, like, second guessing, like, the systems that have been created over the past 240 years, you know? Systems that, as Americans, we've prided ourselves on and that we've really developed a sense of confidence in. So it's just like it is unsettling. And I do have one other question that might be an interesting one to discuss because I had someone ask me this as well. Do you think it's okay for people to dissociate with others on the basis of political differences?
I think that if you feel comfortable with disengaging with someone because of how you feel, and you should always go with your gut. I think you should do what feels natural. And you should always go with what feels natural to you. And you should always go with what your inner light tells you. And if your inner light tells you that this person doesn't make you feel good, that what they're saying to you makes you feel bad, or makes you feel inferior, or makes you feel like something is not right, then you should go with that.
Agreed. I definitely agree with that. How about on a personal level for yourself? Is that your philosophy personally too?
You're right. If at any time what someone says, or what someone does, with in regards to what they're saying, if whatever they're saying is just not right, and I can't work it out with them, I can't hash it out with them at all. If after a conversation with them, or after working it out with them, we just can't come to some agreement, um, it's time to say goodbye
Mhm.
because I'm not going to be put down upon. I'm not going to be treated poorly. I'm not going to have someone tread upon my values, and continue to have a relationship with them, if they're going to tread upon my light.
I really like that. I can really relate with that too. I like, obviously, I mean, I would argue that we both are activists, and I mean, because we're having these conversations, and I've just become accustomed over the years that as an activist, you are gonna have difficult conversations with people who don't always agree with you. And I know for me, like, I've been having a lot of very difficult conversations with family and some friends who disagree with things. And, like, obviously, I'm always approaching political decisions on the basis of, like, well, what will these decisions do for more vulnerable populations? And of course, like, if somebody disagrees and prioritizes, say, like, economics or something else over people, like, I will have frank conversations, but I do so in a patient way and try to create an educational moment from
Right.
it. Like, I really do think that having conversations with this requires a lot of patience. It may require multiple conversations.
And you have to establish whether or not it's worth it to have that conversation with somebody. Like if it's somebody who you are just not close with enough and not friends with enough, like, is it worth it to have that conversation with them, or is it worth it to just cut them out of your life? Or if you're close enough friends with them, is it worth it to have that conversation? And if you decide yes, it is, then it is worth keeping that friendship close. Then you have that conversation. But if they're not close enough friends and you don't care about them enough, then maybe it's worth it to just cut them off.
Right. Like, it's not gonna be an easy decision, but you have to kind of create your own deductive process in doing so. And, like, I think at the end of the day, if you deem that if you deem that it's not really worth it, then you're like you were saying earlier, Ari, following your gut instinct is the best way to go, you know? Now, I always try to approach these type like, I always look at it at in the sense of, like, how is this person's tone? Like, if a person's going to come at me attacking, then that's usually my cue, like, "Okay, shut this down, I'm done with it." But if a person's at least willing to listen, that is an olive branch. And I think that it requires listening on our parts too, because you often will keep a person in a conversation by demonstrating that you are listening to what they're saying. That's why I'm very passionate about trying to rephrase social justice warrior into social justice educator, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the intent to fight. The intent is to educate, because if you educate, then you don't have to fight. You know, obviously that also depends on whether or not the recipient is receiving the message clearly, open to the message. Like, there's a lot of variables, um, but I do think that there is a lot of potential for teachable moments, even for people who definitely disagree passionately. Oh, that's really nice, Shayna. That's cool. So, do I need to catch up on comments? By the way, I've noticed that we've had like 11 to 12 people on tonight. That's the most people I think we've had on. Like, woo!
No.
Um, shameless plug, because we're gonna be wrapping up here in just a little bit, but shameless plug. Subscribe to Ari's channel, Strange Nothings, if you haven't yet. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. Click like on our video. If you enjoy what we have to say, if you enjoy our content, and if other people might benefit from it, feel free to share. We really enjoy having conversations, and as you can tell, we are very interactive with the people commenting on our streams. So we enjoy having a conversation with everyone, even with people who might disagree with us, of course.
My channel's mostly poetry and tarot card readings.
Which is really, really fun to watch, though. Really fun to watch. I like, aside from doing these streams, I haven't been doing a whole lot on my channel lately other than transforming into women. Um, but I'm gonna probably be doing more videos here, like, in the next few days. The school year has been really, really getting taxing. Like, let's end on some good news. How about that? Good news, Ari and I have been published in an anthology of poetry, titled "Alien Buddha Wears a Black Bandana," and it is an anthology themed around revolution and protest. Both of us have poems in it, and we're so excited. It is a book published by my publisher, who published my collection of poems, Carbon Footprint. And in fact, I'm going to plop a link right in the chat box for all of you. If you were interested, let me go grab it really quickly. It's just like Ari and I, like, and I know you can probably speak to this as well, Ari, but we've wanted to do creative things together for a long, long time.
I'm
Um,
so excited for this book to come
oh my
out.
gosh, me too. Like, it should be arriving for me on Sunday, and I am literally flailing over it. Um, but we've been wanting to write something together for a long time, or at least get published together. And now that we can say that we have been published in an anthology together, it is so unbelievably exciting. It's just exciting. So, anyway, I put a link in the chat box. I'm also going to put a link to it in the description section of this video. If you all come back, or if like new viewers come back, feel free to comment in the comment section. Ari, do you have any final words, any parting words for our family, our virtual family?
No matter what happens, it's gonna all be okay. We're gonna get through this. Patience is a virtue, and all virtues pay off in the end.
Agreed. A perfect. And we love you all. We hope you have a good night, and tune in next Friday, which is, what, isn't it Friday the 13th? Friday the
Friday the
13th.
13th!
You have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.